theory and statistics. That's me, and I work at the company called QA.tech. And QA.tech is essentially trying to optimize and abstract away a lot of complexities around QA testing. So we primarily focus on web products, and we build AI agents that essentially test web applications the way that real users do. So clicking, scrolling, breaking things, and then trying to explain why, which users don't usually do then. Yes. So the idea is essentially to kind of help remove a lot of the friction around QA. QA is traditionally a pretty cumbersome kind of area, which means that you either have manual testers that click around in your platform to ensure that stuff is working as it should, or you have scripted tests that does exactly step-by-step instructions in your interface. The problem with that is that on the manual side, it's very kind of time-consuming and costly, and you need to manage a lot of people to kind of test all of the things that you actually care about in your platform. And on the scripted side, you kind of build up essentially a shadow kind of a code base of things that you need to maintain, which if you think about it in a product, if you at the end kind of application, if you want to click stuff on a specific location or identifier, wait 300 milliseconds, then do something else, and then you constantly change that platform, your suite of tests will constantly need a lot of maintenance as well. It's very, very, very cumbersome to maintain. And then also, it's pretty hard to understand coverage. When you think about coverage, when you have just scripted things, you need to make sure that maps to user flows, how those actually kind of function, what is important in our platform, what is actually driving revenue, what happens if something doesn't work, and we risk of losing customers or kind of potential revenue, right? And also another thing is that usually developers in QA don't really share context that well. You have developers working on specific features, and then you have a QA team trying to kind of test that those things work as they should, but they don't always, they might, but work very closely together and understand and share the same context. So that's a problem. So what if we had like a living map of the product itself so that we can test a lot smarter? Something that can kind of understand the context of our platform and understand which user flows exist, map coverage, and bridge the gap between human and AI in this case instead of QA tester. To just kind of give you a reasonable kind of understanding of a recent customer that we had, that in the first month, they actually tested 11,000 user flows in their application. So this is very, very hard to do if you're trying to script all of those things, or if you have manual people doing all of those 11,000 things, you would complete those in a month. So it also enables you to run things a lot faster and more closer to the developers, and then make sure that your application functions as it should. Traditional QA then is typically approaching this more as either manual, you have test scripts, and then you run some CI integration with static tests. And as I said, there are some limitations to this. You don't really have a global view. There's no semantics about the applications. You have to you essentially just script recipes about how the application should function. You're more testing the how rather than like the what in the application. And it's very expensive to maintain, as I said. Another thing that is very interesting now is that the more AI-enabled developers become, we kind of have a new kind of bottlenecks. When you think about it from the theory of constraints in a kind of production pipeline, right? Like if you have some part being a lot more productive than before, then there's going to introduce new bottlenecks. And QA is definitely becoming more of a new bottleneck in modern teams, because it's very hard to keep up. Even if you use cursor and things to kind of script or hard-coded scripts, it takes more time and it's more cumbersome to understand and really test all of those new features that come out. So why graphs? Well, first of all, when you think about it from the intuition standpoint, it's super powerful, like we've heard before today. But web apps are inherently graph-shaped. You have like pages, you have different actions, you have user flows through all of those kind of paths in the graph. And it has been used before in graphs, like in places like Google and so forth, to kind of figure out how the internet works and how you can kind of reason about different connectivity on the internet. And then we also need like really deep context. So QA is all about kind of navigating around, linking and reasoning over different relationships in the application, and trying to kind of understand and really, really deep dive into this is what makes a QA really good. So if we want to make AI kind of really good at testing an application, we need it to understand and really kind of dig deep into the use cases of the actual applications. And then why we chose Neo4j, I think has been said a little bit before today. It's really powerful with the possibility to do traversals. You can kind of do things like coverage analysis, planning, the dependency chains between different tests and how they kind of affect the platform and things. It's also extremely flexible when it comes to schema and growing context. And we can also combine it with things like embeddings and semantic search, which makes it possible for us to also kind of link more textual kind of understanding and kind of search in the graph and then kind of expand from there. So super powerful. And when we look at it from the architecture standpoint, essentially how we structure the graph is that we have like a project that has a certain amount of tests on it. Those tests links to kind of pages, and pages links to actions, and also test also links to actions, so we understand which actions have been taken within the specific tests, and then all of those kind of boil up to what we call features. We also make it possible to scrape like documentation and other external information about the page and kind of bring that context into the graph as well. So we have this kind of similar that we saw in one of the previous talks, where you have like a document with sections and chunks and how they're mentioned and how that connect back to the page graphs and all of those things. It's also possible to have really rich metadata in this. So it's not only about like the nodes and the connections, but also what you can kind of put in there and then use that in conjunction with this kind of graph expansions. So we store a lot of things in the nodes to make it easier for us to do different kinds of searches. So we have several different embeddings within there to do different kinds of searches, or we're looking for similar kind of similarities within the kind of descriptions or meanings about what actually happens when I perform an action, or are we more looking into things like where their stuff is located on the page, or how they kind of refer to similar things across different entities. And then, of course, we can store stuff like screenshots and HTML snippets and a lot of these kind of things. And then on the clustering side, we have a few different kind of clustering methods to kind of boil up and produce these kind of feature nodes, which essentially then connects to the different parts of the graphs, so that it's easier for us to understand, like for a specific user flow or a specific kind of part of the application. Say we're interested in kind of testing out and understanding the user account and the management kind of features on the page. This is a pretty simple example of the page graph or the feature graph, but still. Then I could just kind of find that node specifically and then expand and understand which parts of the application is actually referring to this. In order to build this graph, I mean, we scrape a lot of things. So when you're onboarded as a new customer, essentially what we do is that behind the scenes we spawn like a crawling agent. It's not just a regular crawl when we kind of follow links, because that's not really enough. We need to also understand what happens when you open menus and click on things and pop-ups appear and like all of these things. So it's more like an explorative agent that clicks around and understands your application. And that builds up more and more kind of graph features. We also run different kinds of tests, both kind of regression tests where we want to understand if stuff's changed over time, and then also explorative tests where we kind of test a new feature that we haven't seen before. And then all of this stuff we stream to PubSub, which is just like a message bus. And then we have a system built in Apache Beam that runs on Google Dataflow. that essentially processes this. So a lot of like raw information that just comes from all of the different customers, and then we run machine learning and LLM kind of workloads, compute a lot of embeddings and connect things together, and then process this in a streaming fashion, and then just push everything into Neo4j. Yes, that's how we do that. And this makes it possible for us to construct like a hierarchical context. When you think about it from this kind of project, feature, and page, and then action, it's possible for us to have a description about what a specific action does. Like the example we had before, it was just like a click accept on the cookie banner or something. It's super simple. But then down there we have like a specific model it's a small multimodal model that's really, really fast, that looks at all the actions. We can have thousands of actions in each kind of frame that we process, so it needs to be really, really fast. But it produces just small descriptions about what actions does, what happens when I click this button, what happens when I hover on this thing, and then all of those kind of aggregate up to a page. And then the page also get a description then that kind of summarizes what all of the different actions does, what are the important features on this page, and also together with the screenshot. And then all of the different pages then aggregate up to a feature, so it's possible to get like rich descriptions about what a specific feature is doing, and what that is all about. And then at the project level, you have the possibility then to kind of summarize all of these things. And the reason for having this hierarchical context is makes it much easier for us to build agentic kind of LLM systems that gets context that is relevant, and also possible for it to kind of deep dive deeper and deeper into the hierarchy. So starting out, like if you asked a simple question to our chatbot, for example, it would have this kind of product summary already available, but it wouldn't have all the actions. That doesn't really make sense. It's going to be thousands and thousands of actions. It's going to run out of context instantly, right? So then say I ask it to kind of test the specific kind of property listings that is listed here. Well, then it understands that this is tied to a feature. So then it can expand and drill deeper into that feature. And then if it needs even more information, it can kind of go into all the way down to kind of specific actions. Yes. So, like I said, what we can use this for is a few different things. So first, the most kind of straightforward one is like test generation. So anybody who's been working with testing and writing scripts and stuff, you want to have a lot of different tests about the functionality in your platform, right, to ensure that it works as you intended to. We don't write it on a specific kind of step-by-step level, but rather on an objective level. And having this graph and this kind of hierarchical context makes it possible for us to suggest and understand which part of the application should be tested, and how to kind of construct a test around that, and what's important for the agent to know about to actually perform the test. And then we can also kind of understand coverage rate. Well, you seem to only have tests in this area of the application related to this feature. What about this feature? You could potentially do a lot of different kinds of testing in this area as well to make sure that you cover the user flows that are important in your application. And then also we try to provide like more developer kind of phasing tools around this. So you have the possibility to chat. We integrate with Slack. GitHub is available, but soon coming with a much more kind of rich feature set. And then also linear and things like that. So it's possible to mention and kind of work with the agent and help getting like, oh, I built this new feature. Can you generate tests for it, for example? Or can you run some explorative analysis on this specific part? And the explorative testing is essentially that, right? Like we can kind of figure out like which areas do we need to kind of explore in regards to this change? Have we seen this before? Have we not seen it? Is it new information? Then maybe we need to be extra thorough when we kind of look through those specific parts. I thought I'd do a short demo because Patrick liked it so much last time. So this is what you're kind of met with when you're coming to our platform. This is testing a platform called StayMB, which is obviously some kind of Airbnb clone that is just set up for being able to test things. I tested Systembolagets page last time, and that was actually more fun, but yeah, we'll see. this is what you meant, Will. I've run a few tests here. We only have a few tests, but 15 tests. We can go into to a run and see what has happened. So here we have like run through run through a lot of different tests. We have a few that actually failed, and so forth. So maybe you can look at this kind of booking test. Here you can see the agent kind of starts with opening the browser, like you see this stay in B page, and then it kind of navigates to this first kind of cabin in the woods booking place. It then goes in there, kind of clicks on this reserve thing, scrolls down, fills in some bogus card information and zip code. You can of course kind of create configs and things for the agent so it actually knows which data to provide and so forth. But in this case, it's just a test application. And then it kind of at the end gives you a nice little video of the whole soap flow, which is of course a little bit epileptic because it goes too fast. And then if we look at the kind of test definition, it's not that much that actually needs here. So the only thing that actually was provided here is, sorry, it's kind of go crazy, is the goal, right? So what you have the possibility to specify goals, which is just a high level kind of instruction about what we want to do, what we want to achieve essentially. And then you have the possibility to provide like an expected result. Maybe something specific should have happened. I should have received like a confirmation email, or something should have changed in the dashboard when I sent an invoice or whatever it could be, right? But in this case, we just didn't provide any expected results, so then we just try to achieve the goal, whether or not that actually works. Then it has these kind of high-level steps that are essentially produced in the planning phases by the agent when it looks at the graph. And this kind of changed over time. You don't need to specify them. It's just a very easy and nice way for you to be able to steer the agent. Maybe I don't want it to use that specific kind of booking page. I wanted to look for maybe like a city apartment instead or something. Then I can kind of change these, or I can reorder them or add things. Right? Yes. You also have the possibility to have dependencies. So if we kind of go back to the run here, we can see the dependency graph here is very simple in this case because it's only one kind of config test for this specific, where it calls an API and sets up the environment. But then and then you have the few different tests. But in the dependency chain, you have the possibility to kind of pass along things, and then we can also run things in parallel. So maybe you have like a login test first that creates a logged in session for a specific type of user, and you want to ensure that it sees the right things. It has the ability to kind of do some specific things in the settings, and there could be a lot of different things. Then we just kind of replicate that session and spawn new agents for all of these different kind of things that we want to test, and then we can run them all in parallel. Yes, and then we have this kind of chat feature. So, like I said, the chat has the ability to look and kind of search in the graph, and it can help you with a lot of different things, like analyzing your test coverage, what could be improved. It can also help you kind of generate things and spawn explorative tests and things. And so maybe we can kind of ask it here, like, how can I improve my test suite? It was a pretty limited test suite in the first place, so hopefully it comes up with something good. Here it starts with like thinking a little bit, and then it fetches context and things. So we have this agentic chat agent that actually kind of decides whether or not it needs more information. And that also makes it, that's where this kind of hierarchical things comes in as well. It can kind of fetch information about the test that it has, like, and drill deeper into the graph and understand where it needs to kind of, what it needs to understand in order to kind of give you a relevant response. So here it's searching the graph. It's very slow now. Anthropic has been also really kind of poorly performing today. I was a little bit afraid just before here. I got like what was it called? Like the API was not responding at all. It's very scary. Good go. Well, luckily, I asked this question just before. So here we have like current strengths. We have a good organization. We're checking the core search functionality, some property details and stuff. But we have some major coverage gaps, right? We don't really do anything with experiences. User profile management is kind of doesn't really have any tests at all, and calendar functionality is not functioning at all. And what I can do then is like, oh, okay, but can you kind of help me then? And then you have the possibility to kind of get suggested tests and help you improve your test suite. And this can, of course, also be run then from different kinds of endpoints. So it could be, for example, that you have a colleague or a user that sends you a message on Slack saying like, oh, this thing is not functioning. Then you could just mention that in Slack, like, oh, hey, QA.tech, can you actually reproduce this bug for us? And then you get like a full recording, like we got with the test we saw before, like how it clicks step by step, and where it tries to kind of reproduce that specific bug that is mentioned in Slack or whatever. Okay.
What information, right?
Yeah, the main was a bad example. I think it does have stuff, but it's not actually kind of clickable. That's why it's confused. It was like, oh, but I can't find this in the graph. So do you really have this? And then it has to kind of, I as a user have to provide them like more details, because it shouldn't create tests that don't really make sense if it's not available in the graph and all the kind of data that we have collected. Yes. That's kind of it. So, well, we're gonna focus on, like, going forward is to kind of increase the agent's capabilities and how it kind of structures different things in together with the graph, so that we can kind of make even more advanced kind of QA capabilities, and then also kind of focusing even more on the software development lifecycle and trying to kind of be more closer to both the product teams and the developers, so that it's easier to test your things more like a QA-driven development, rather than it being like something at the end of the chain, only running when you kind of have a pre-deployment step in production, for example. And then this exploratory testing feature is something that we're just building out, and it's going to be possible to run that on PRs for even faster feedbacks and things. That's coming soon. So that's what we're focusing on in the future. Thank you for listening, and do check us out on QA.tech.